Hello, everyone. I want to kind of approach the conversations that we've been having on As You Learn in terms of social media trends. I want to read over your responses, but I also want to cover some of the ones that I've gathered from reading the articles, as well as bringing some of my own expertise based on my profession, as well as some of the research that has been gathered about media trends and social media in general. So I've got 6 things that I want to cover over, and I'm going to try to make it fairly quick for everybody to help kind of discuss not only some of the trends that you might see, but some of the areas behind those trends that aren't really seen very well. So like I said, 6 trends within the social media landscape. The first is the idea of short form video. And that is ultimately a video that is going to have a very short runtime of about 30 seconds to a minute or somewhere less than that. The idea behind this kind of went from that landscape of what was formerly known as Vine to what we see in TikTok today. They're bite-sized, they're shareable. For instance, my sister sends them to me all the time. She sent a video where a bowling ball is running over rubber chickens, playing the theme to Jurassic Park. It was strangely cathartic and wonderful to watch with this short runtime. Now, with that, it is important to remember that there is kind of a uses and gratification. So basically, I go on the platform for a specific reason. So something like TikTok, something like Instagram Reels, something like Facebook Stories. Generally speaking, I'm going there for a short form platform. Okay, this is the kind of thing where I'm used to it and I'm going there for a specific purpose. But there is a misconception because it's based on the platform. So while TikTok and Instagram are very good for short form, there is also the area of things like Twitch, as well as YouTube live streaming, that still the longer works with the algorithm. Now, with that, Twitch's algorithm is not great. YouTube is based on retention. So how long do you view that video? And it's not something that is mixed in with longer or shorter videos. So in other words, if you watch 3 minutes of a 15 long video, it's the same thing as if you watch 3 minutes of a 3-minute long video. It's the same amount of time. Now, there are some variables that kind of connect with that, but in the same respect, it still has that 15-minute runtime that even if you're not paying attention for a very long time, it still gets a good retention rate. So these are areas within short form that are very popular and oddly enough are on the rise on YouTube as well. In terms of what goes viral, in terms of what's important for people in terms of sharing purposes. The other thing we could talk about that came up a little bit in the articles that you were reading was advocacy. Now, this is not something that isn't particularly new. Brands have been doing this for a long period of time with corporate social responsibility, aka being a corporate citizen in the community that they belong to. So think like a Hershey, Pennsylvania, to where their town is embedded with the brand that they represent in Hershey. And again, obviously the candy bar. But in social media research, we know that certain posts equate to certain audiences. So I want you to think about that as anytime that you post something on social media, who is the intended audience? Who do you think is going to be someone that is going to be amused or concerned by this particular thing that you posted? It's the same concept if you watch something like on LA Bible or something and you tag someone's name on there. That is an indication of a specific purpose and a specific audience for this specific post. Now, that can go the same thing in terms of just regular posts that you make. So in other words, I like certain sports. When I go through my Twitter followers, I know that some people follow me for social science. Some people follow me for gaming research and entertainment. Some people follow me for the stream that I use. Some people follow me for West Ham, soccer that I like to watch, or football. And that's through the English Premier League. I have a group of people that follow me for a very specific reason. They could just be my friends. But when I post, I know that some people are going to ignore it and some others will not, and they will participate. So with advocacy, this is where being able to take a stand gets you into a certain area where your followers exist. So in other words, you have followers that will either agree or disagree with what you're trying to say. Typically speaking, there's a concept within media theory that talks about selective exposure. That means you will seek out those kind of posts that you agree with, those kind of channels that you agree with. You don't pursue something that you don't agree with. Now, that's not always the case. It could be that someone's making a good point, even though you don't necessarily agree with it. So these are areas that taking a stand for something has become increasingly important. The next is live video, streaming, as well as things like premieres, like YouTube. That's become one of my personal favorite trends. There's a channel that I watch pretty frequently. It's called Yelles Marble Runs. It's spelled Jelles. It looks like gels, but I believe it's pronounced Yelles. It's a company out of the Netherlands. And it's, especially during the pandemic, which we're still going through, but when there was no live sports, it was really fun to watch Yelles Marble Runs because that was like the only sports you could watch at the time. And they've created backstories, teams, but what they would do is they'd have premieres, which basically said, here is our time that we are going to go live. And this is a live commentary that's going to happen while this event is going on. Now, I believe these are recorded videos that they're doing, but it is interesting of the scheduling that goes into it, and as well as the length of time. So remember when we talked about short form videos, they are important, but where this kind of falls short a little bit is that in many cases, we can still find a great deal of entertainment in watching a 3-hour stream. So the retention is still very much there. It's still very much something that we'd like to pay attention to if a streamer is funny, if a streamer is engaging, that sort of thing. So live video goes a long way. Now, the other thing that might have to be talked about is with live video is certain business models that exist in terms of how people use things like scarcity. So one of the more interesting case studies is people who do ASMR. So if you don't know what ASMR is, I forget the acronym itself, but the idea behind it is making noises that would be on a microphone that would be aesthetically pleasing to the ear, that it's something enjoyable to listen to. So like scratching something, or I jokingly tell my friends, my personal favorite is when we're in the gym and there's a certain noise. It's kind of like a whoosh noise when you put a weight onto a barbell. I don't know why I get a big kick out of it, but that's like my ASMR. Things like pouring a drink, chewing, this can, I don't like some of them, but other people do. My point of this is that ASMR streamers, for instance, do a very interesting business model where they will do a scarcity train, which basically say, I am going to do ASMR, and in 30 minutes, I'm going to stop the stream unless I get 25 subs. So subs would be a $5.99 a month subscription, and maybe give out a couple of more subs to other people. So 25 of those by the end of 30 minutes, or I'm shutting off the stream. So what's interesting about that is normally what will happen is 24 minutes will go by, maybe 1 or 2 people have donated. It gets to about 29 minutes, and then somebody will come in and pay for the whole thing. So they'll pay all 25 subs that they were looking for in 30 minutes, and then the stream will continue for another 30 minutes. Now, if it doesn't meet, what will eventually happen is they'll just cut off the stream. So again, this is fascinating how some of these streams work. And it was a business model that we kind of found by accident, but at the same time, I thought, what an interesting way to communicate an area of advertising here. So that's live video. Live video has become not only very important, but at the same time, it's become a way to see the kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? the back scenes of everything. You get to be the backstage, get to see people's lives. We've loved celebrity culture and seen that, they're normal human beings, really is entertaining for us. So that's 3. So first and foremost, we covered over short form video, advocacy, live video, other things we're going to talk about in the last 3. Next is QR codes in social commerce. Now, within the pandemic, you may have noticed that certain places, I can note in the high country where I am in Boone, have adopted QR codes on the table. So they will have a QR code that says, scan this and you can have the menu. Now, personally, I think this is not only a great idea, but it's something that may save people a little bit of money in terms of printing costs for having a tangible menu. Now, some people don't like that. Some people like the tangible menu in front of you. And so you have to know your audience with that. However, being able to scan your phone with QR codes, as well as products themselves. So it's not just something like Shazam, which has been around for a while, that you can identify a song, and I still do. But it also has a lot to do with if you were to spot a pair of shoes, you could take a picture of it, upload it, and be able to see other places that would have this brand of shoe, which is pretty neat. And maybe being able to see it if it's sold at a lower price. So now things like shops on Facebook have come up. So what they'll do is they'll show an image up on Facebook, and they'll have a link that you can go to purchase this. This happens a lot on the West Ham page that I'm on. So West Ham United, again, the soccer team that I follow. One of the things they'll do is they'll have a mark for jerseys when you're looking at a player. So you'll see a picture of a player, they're wearing the jersey. And what they'll do is they'll link you to the store. They're not very good at it right now. The algorithm that Facebook has implemented in terms of what you click on has become extremely annoying. I'm not a fan of it, and it needs to be improved. But again, that's where social commerce comes in. Next is personalization. And this is something that a lot of people are getting very worried about. So it's not something that's new, but things like Google searches, things like anytime you post on Facebook about something, you might find yourself getting an advert based on some of the things that you look for, even it was just searching it for one time. So I know one time I was looking to run a marathon, and I thought cycling jerseys would be a great idea, which they were. And so I typed it in once, and it was all over my Facebook, all over my Twitter, and these adverts would start popping up. Now, and I'm not trying to paranoid y'all even further, but it does take a great deal of media literacy to kind of understand what's being promoted out there. And while it's very hard for people to track people individually, it is something that, again, requires a great deal of media literacy. So in other words, posts that will randomly show up that will say something to the, what was your grandparents' names and what were their jobs? And what sounds like kind of a fun activity, or like what was something that you did that you were a kid, a hobby of yours, that you see a sometimes older demographic participate in this for a feeling of nostalgia, which in some cases it is, but in other cases it can be a way to gather passwords, because ultimately you would say, what are the things that I would normally use for my passwords? They could be, a parent's name, it can be a dog that you once had, it can be an activity or a favorite sports team. You use something that's usually close to you. And so that's something that you have to look out for, and where phishing scams can start. But it also has to do with, what's being listened to. I often think about what I'm saying out loud versus what I'm typing and what shows up in terms of my search engine. It's become way more personal than it used to be when it comes to advertising. And while some of that is good, because you will eventually find things that you specifically want, not just things that are in your ballpark range. This is something that had been going on for years with grocery stores that would be looking at what you purchase with your VIC card, for instance, or your MVP card at Food Lion, being able to track that information in your purchasing pattern. It's not really for sales, it's for purchasing patterns. But That's the kind of thing that we pay attention to, and how it's become way more personal and interactive for that case. And especially if you click on those ads based on what you've already typed in and showing that you've expressed interest, not only what you've seen in the ad, but now you're interacting with it. So again, of the last three, we've talked about QR codes and social commerce, personalization, and what I call the niche just becomes that more niche. So that's the last one. It's no secret that the more we've gone into social media, the more that we've gone into niche opinions and niche topics. So in other words, we have seen the media landscape change since its days of, just say, for the instance, the television. Television comes to fruition. You might have 3 channels that you pay attention to, your NBC, ABC, CBS. Our opinions are going to be fairly consistent with that. As we grow and cable starts coming out, dish, satellite come out, now we've got more places that we can look for. Instead of saying these are the few shows that I can watch, now I have multiple options, and that changes my agenda and my opinions. Not directly, of course, but there is some indirect correlation where that can occur. The next thing is that now we're looking at streaming services and places on the internet to where it's not something to where we're saying, it's not just an expert in cars, it's knowing about a brand of a certain car or trucks in general. It's not knowing about video games in general. It's about being an expert in the series. We're starting to see more and more through things like Discord, for instance, which is a social media platform that kind of really goes off the lens with Twitch or YouTube, and people subscribe to that to be that much more in the know. It's the same thing with Patreon. Again, it's not so much that I'm following sports. It's somebody that's an expert in a specific team. And you can start seeing more and more where people trust those individual sources, even as journalists, because they're in the know. It's the same reason why national news media outlets pay attention to local media outlets, because they're the ones that are right there. They're the ones that are going to give you the reliable information, because they're going to give you that kind of context. So what we're seeing is, again, things that are becoming niche become even more niche, to where those subcategories of subcategories that we're paying attention to, we find, because we're very much invested in that one thing, not just the overall piece. So we might see media landscapes move even further into a much smaller space, which will increase social identity. It will increase community. Sometimes it will create that more of selective exposure. These are all variables that we need to pay attention to and focus on. So those are the 6 things that I wanted to talk about in terms of the trends I've noticed. I will be reading out for your responses and hopefully have a video to discuss those a little bit in terms of what you said. Thank you all for listening, and I will talk to you next time. Thank you.